Hello, and a huge welcome to this week's episode of the podcast. If you have been living under a rock, you wouldn't know this, but if you haven't been living under a rock, you would probably know that I have just finished a sales campaign for a product inside of my business. Now, I love people that are a little bit sharey because I am a little bit nosy. And so if you are like me and you love hearing a little bit about the behind the scenes and sharing numbers associated with sales campaigns, or is it just me that gets really excited about that? I don't know. But if that's you, I'm going to share some of that with you today. So a little bit of context. I have just changed things up a little bit inside of my business. What I have realized is that people need to take action. There is this epidemic of inaction at the moment in online business, and I think we're all overwhelmed. I've spoken about that in previous podcast episodes. And so I have launched a complementary product to my core product that is all about implementation. So I have Lifestyle Business School, which is really the strategy around building a lifestyle business. And now I have the Lifestyle Business Operating System, which is, okay, hey, have this strategy. Now let's implement the damn thing. And so, as I recommend to my students, I launched that for the first time publicly in order to gather some data that I can then take to repeat that sales campaign over and over again. So I want to share with you a few of the core numbers that I looked at when I was looking at the results of that particular sales campaign, because I have just wrapped up my debrief. Funnest time ever, let me just say. And I want to share some of those with you. So the three numbers that I want to share with you today aren't actually what revenue I made, what profit I made, what number of students I had, or any of the numbers that you might actually expect for me to share, because they are actually not the most illuminating numbers when it comes to the results of a sales campaign. So what I'm instead going to share with you are the three numbers that I'm now going to use now that that sales campaign has come to an end, in order to figure out what it is that I want to change, what it is that I want to iterate, and what it is that I want to improve to make that campaign as profitable and successful as possible over time. Now, this is the process when it comes to launching anything. There has been this story sold in the online business space that you have this one big launch and that it bankrolls the rest of your days. And to be honest, there probably was a time in internet business land where that was the case. I know definitely for me, the very first online launch I ever did was wildly successful, and also it was a very different time. There are also a lot of gurus in the online business space that got wildly wealthy by having one really big launch every single year. And again, that was at a different time. I genuinely think that kind of rhetoric inside of online business has been the reason that people have just had these wildly unrealistic expectations of what it means to build an online business. The first launch, aka sales campaign that you do inside of your business, is an opportunity to see how it's going to go. It's an opportunity to test your messaging and your positioning and the offer itself, and to see how many people actually say, hey, this solves a problem and I actually want this. So that is the job of your first campaign. And that is the job of this campaign, or it was the job of this campaign for me in launching it. It was the first time that I had talked about this offer. It was the first time that I had talked in depth about what I feel the problem is at the moment, which is a complete lack of action and a need for implementation and tracking of results. I genuinely feel that it is the missing link for just about everybody. And so I needed to test all of that out. So I did that. I did that in a campaign that went not only to people that came in cold from Meta ads, although that was a large percentage of the people in the campaign, but also to my existing audience. I am promoting this the first time to everybody, so cold people coming in and also to my existing audience, but I won't be doing that moving forward. For the people that are already on my email list or Instagram, or you listening to this podcast now, you won't even know that I am running this campaign again and again. The goal is to do it monthly or even more often than that, once I settle myself in my new location, which I'll be talking about more in next week's podcast episode, and doing it on a regular cadence. But for this first time, it was everybody. So what are the 3 numbers that I looked at, and what did they tell me in this campaign? So the 3 numbers are CPL, RPL, and CPA. What gobbledygook is that, Stevie? So I'm going to go through each of them in order, and I'm going to share what the number was approximately for me. So the first number that I looked at was CPL, which is cost per lead, which means for the meta ads that I ran to the webinar, so it was a webinar funnel, how much every lead that came from webinar ads cost me. Now, for me, the cost of those on average was around about $11 to $12 cost per lead. So that meant that for every lead that came in, I paid $11 to $12 for those leads. Now, is that a good result or a bad result? Well, I can tell you that I actually at some points in the campaign was paying like $20 plus per lead. At one point, I actually put $800 in just before I went to do school pickup, turned the campaign on. I was gone for half an hour, and by the time I got back, Meta had spent the entire $800. It came out at like a $50 cost per lead, and that was that. I think that was a huge error in terms of the way that Meta was setting up and running the AI component of their ads. But anyway, that did happen. So it doesn't mean that it was always $11 or $12 like clockwork. What it actually meant is that in the 3 weeks that I was running ads in the lead up to the webinar, on average, it was $11 to $12. Now, by the end of that 3 weeks, I had actually gotten the cost per lead down to about $4 or $5, which for a webinar campaign is incredible, but it averaged out over that time. So a lot of people will make decisions when it comes to a sales campaign based on the cost per lead. They'll kind of say the cost per lead was too high or too low, and I'm going to turn those ads off. And actually, you can't make a decision on the success or otherwise of a campaign based on the cost per lead. What actually matters is some of these other numbers that I'll talk to you about in a moment. So the second number that I looked at was RPL, which is revenue per lead. So we've talked about cost per lead, so what it cost to get a lead. Now we're talking about revenue per lead, which is of all of the money that I made inside of the campaign, so the revenue, how much money did I make per lead that came into that promotion? Now, the number for me for that promotion was $25. My revenue per lead was $25. So for every lead that registered for the webinar, that was worth $25 to me. So what does this number tell me? Well, it is very important in the context of paid advertising campaigns. The reason for that is that when you look at your cost per lead, which for me was $11 or $12, and I look at my revenue per lead, which was $25, I was making a 2-to-1 return on the money that I spent in the campaign. Spending $11, making back $25, is that a win? Yes, it is. The one thing that was on my mind for me in this campaign, though, is that quite a lot of the sales actually didn't come from my cold ads. And so what I would need to do is work out separating out the cold ad traffic from the warm traffic, what those numbers came out at. I would have liked to have seen that number significantly higher. Now, this is actually really normal the first time that you run a campaign. It is likely, unless you just fluke it or you're an incredible master positioning and messaging expert, you're not going to knock it out of the park the very first time. It is usually going to give you an indication of where you might like to improve. So for me, even though I'm like, yes, the campaign was profitable, yes, I made a profit on it, I actually, with that number and considering the amount of warm traffic that was inside of the campaign, would have liked to have seen it higher. Now, the third number that was relevant in this campaign was cost per acquisition, so CPA. Cost per acquisition is how much did it cost me to acquire a new customer? Now, this is, for me, the most important number. So it cost me, my number was $850. So it cost me $850 to get a new customer for this particular offer. Now, the offer was on sale at that time, so it meant that my acquisition costs were about 40% of the total value of the offer. That's fine, and actually that's pretty normal in any other business in the world. You're going to pay an acquisition cost to get a customer, right? It's crazy that in this online business world, we think that we can get this stuff free, which we can't. And so I'm not overly disappointed in that number. It's not the number that I expected though. So as I start to scale this campaign, there are going to be changes that I want to make to that campaign, and I'm going to be using some of those numbers as really valuable intel into what it is that I might want to change. So of course, in addition to those numbers, I tracked a whole heap of other numbers. I have a spreadsheet that I use that I share with my students inside of Lifestyle Business School and the operating system that has all of the numbers that I track. And I track that for every single campaign so that I have a clean run of numbers every single month. I'm going to be looking to beat the numbers before. As I started to get more granular, I could start to see the opportunities for improving both that revenue per lead number and that cost per acquisition number. So a few of the things that I was looking at in terms of improvements for next time is the show up rate, so the number of people that actually showed up on the webinar live. That was something that absolutely can be optimized. I want to add in text messaging. I want to add in more reminders, more reasons to come along. I will be inviting people closer to the actual webinar date. There's a lot of optimizations and things that I can do. My follow-up sales sequence, I just ran out of time. It was the first time that I ran the campaign, and so there was a lot of opportunity for me to, and there is a lot of opportunity for me to improve. Now, this is actually the case with a lot of first campaigns. Like, you're creating the product, you're creating all of the assets, you're doing everything, and you can't do it all, right? And so the exciting thing once you get your first run of data is that you actually have the time the second time to sit down and improve some of those things because you're not doing all of the things that you did in that first campaign. And so you get to improve and optimize the smaller things, the things that together can make a really big difference. So the sales follow-up sequence, definitely the show-up rate, the opt-in page. So the opt-in page for people that opted in for the webinar was really low when I first started out. Something like 15%, I think, of people were opting in. I got that up to about 35% just by making tweaks throughout that campaign, which is pretty good. But obviously there is more room for optimization and improvement there as well. So they're going to be the first things that I work on when I run this campaign again. I'm also going to be making a few little tweaks to the way that I present the offer, so that's going to be interesting. And obviously now that there isn't the launch pricing anymore, we'll see what impact that has as well. So I hope that little behind the scenes insight into my most recent campaign and three of the numbers that I look at, being cost per lead, revenue per lead, and cost per acquisition, what they looked like for me and the decisions that I make on the base and off the back of that were interesting. Like I said, I love hearing about other people's numbers. If this was interesting to you as well, you're welcome. All right, guys, I will leave it there. If you would like to get more content like this, and in next week's episode, a little bit more of a personal behind the scenes peek into some of my thoughts and things coming up for me on the horizon that I think you'll find pretty interesting, definitely hit the subscribe button. And until then, I'll see you then.